I'm going to get us started. I don't have my little fancy dancy things that I have reminding me what to say, so I'm just going to go by memory, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. But this is a public remote Zoom meeting, and copies or recording of this will be available. I think, is there anybody on from IT, and are we recording right now?
We are recording right now, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Is that Gino?
Nope, it's Chris from WRPS.
Oh, hey, Chris from WRPS. Thanks.
Hello.
Appreciate it. So this meeting is being recorded and will be available, I believe, on the website, and meeting minutes will also be available and posted with the town hall. So that's that. With that, we're going to start off our finance meeting for Wednesday, May 20th. Let me just check and make sure we have a quorum. I don't know, Julie, if you've been able to kind of keep track of who's on.
I've been making a list, but I don't think we have a quorum of finance.
Okay, so we got me, we got Bob, we got Julie.
And Joe.
We got Joe, we got Craig, we got Jeff, we got Bill Stewart.
Yeah.
We got Sheila.
We have Bill Principe.
Bill
Okay.
Principe. I think does that put us at a quorum, Julie?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right, quorum being present, we will be able to start the meeting and go from there. Okay, so just I'll review briefly the meeting minutes in terms of the agenda. So first of all, the town accountant, town administrator are going to talk about the shortfall FY20 and FY21. We can certainly take some of these things out of order too. I'll rely on the folks from the town to kind of direct us which direction they want to go. And if there's any voting or anything that needs to be done on our part, we'll go ahead and take that up. Again, Biz, I appreciate you being on. Hope your foot's getting better. But you can kind of direct us and lead us through some of that. There's also a rental assistant PowerPoint prezo. I believe Jen Constable worked on that. I saw Jen on the in the group there, so we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, Jen. And we'll be looking for you to, I guess, walk us through some of that prezo, and we can have some conversation around that. There's also some transfer requests that may need to be done. There actually may be a previous transfer request that we have to talk about reconsidering. So again, Biz, I'll rely on you to kind of handle that. And I'm assuming, Biz, for any transfer requests that we vote on in this meeting, is it still going to require my signature? And if it is that something that'll be left at the town hall for me?
What will happen is I can email it to you and you can sign it electronically.
Okay.
Electronic signatures are acceptable right now.
Okay, yeah, and I'll just scan it and send it back to you. So,
okay, perfect.
actually, the electronic signatures are like almost like originals, it seems like these days.
Yeah, I'll send you a PDF, and then if you go into your PDF and you have writable, you can just do sign and sign the PDF and do it that way.
All right, perfect.
Okay.
One thing, Doug, were you able to, you had sent me some stuff right before the meeting, but I was busy and I didn't see it until just before the meeting. I printed a copy for me, but did you distribute that to anybody, or was that?
I didn't forward it to anybody else other than you, but I'm prepared to share it on my screen so that people can look at it in real time. I wasn't sure if you wanted to forward the email to the rest of the committee. That's your call.
Okay. So you've got the one that has the 3 attachments, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So let me just do that. I apologize, everyone. I was busy doing my real job. Anything, and then so we'll start off. I'm going to forward everybody this email. It's got 3 attachments. One is use of free cash. Another one is the budget. Some adjustments to the budget. And then there's another one that's on there too. I can't really see what it is right now, but you're going to get 3 attachments as part of that. So while you're having a chance to kind of receive that email, why don't we start off, if we want, we can go over the rental program. Would that be a good place to start, Doug?
Sure, as long as Jen is ready on the call and ready to talk about it, sure.
I'm fine with that, John.
Okay. All right, let me, are you going to share your screen or do you want me to share?
I don't know if I have the ability, let me see. Oh, I could share my screen with you.
Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen here?
See it.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
All right, so I will walk you guys through the PowerPoint presentation, maybe a little bit on the abbreviated side to focus in on the information that's really relevant to this conversation. But in summary, the Board of Selectmen and the Community Preservation Committee both voted unanimously to support a temporary emergency rental assistance program utilizing Community Preservation Act funds, specifically the Affordable Housing Fund bucket. And a little bit of information on the CPC funding, excuse me, the CPA funding. There have not yet been any projects funded utilizing the affordable housing money, nor are there any affordable housing projects in the pipeline, which I guess in this current time is somewhat of a blessing. Just a little bit of information on why this program is important in Rockland. Rockland, similar to the statewide statistics, has about 25.5% renter population versus homeownership population. And as you can see, it's not that off from what's typical statewide, which is about 37%. 40%, and this piece is particularly important, 40% of all renters in Rockland are housing cost burden, which means they spend in excess of 30% of their income on their housing expenses. And of that 40%, 20% of those are severely cost burden. And so the expectation being, if, where we're seeing record unemployment rates, I think last I heard was just about 34 million nationwide. We know that in Massachusetts, and I'll get to some of those statistics, we're seeing tremendous amounts of unemployment. Those households that were already struggling to make their housing payments are likely to really bear the burden of the impact of lost employment as it relates to their housing. Some employment information and the employment impact on Rockland residents. There's significant impact industries in which Rockland residents are employed. Between March 16th and April 11th, I apologize, this information is a little bit dated, but it has only increased the number. There are 571 unemployment claims filed. The food, accommodation, retail, healthcare, social assistance, and construction fields were particularly hit hard during this crisis. Those are occupations that are significantly held by a significant number of Rockland residents. The other important piece of information is that the evidence of the economic crisis has disproportionately impacted workers 30 years of age or younger in low to moderate income households. And the piece to take away from that is a lot of your renters are under the age of 30. And obviously low and moderate income households, as we saw earlier, are likely to already be struggling making their rental payments on the average day. The purpose of the program is really to prevent displacement or loss of housing for eligible Rockland households who have suffered a loss or reduction in income specifically related to the COVID-19 pandemic. On the state and federal side, there is some assistance available to those households, but those, while they're helpful in the moment, they're really just a delay on the potentially and likely inevitable foreclosures and evictions. So this assistance that's afforded to them right now are simple or straightforward moratoriums on foreclosures and evictions during the period or 45 days after the emergency declarations expire. However, with the use of CPA funds, there's the ability to utilize local money to put right back into local households. And, you know, it not only, it's really a multiplier program. So if you're helping a household sustain their housing or maintain or attain some level of stability in this uncertain time, there's a landlord behind every renter that has a mortgage payment and has, you know, property taxes due, and that will better enable them to remain stable as well. Just some eligibility requirements for the program. The applicants must be a Rockland resident. This is a unique time when we can designate affordable housing funds specifically to local residents as a preference. Typically, that's not permissible. Household income must be at or below moderate income levels, and CPA that allows applicants to go up to 100% of the area median income. Typically, you can only go to 80%. So at the higher AMI level, we're able to cast the net a little wider and be able to assist more households. They will have to document a loss or reduction in household income as a result of the COVID pandemic. Monthly rental assistance should not exceed the fair market rent for the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy HUD limits. Rockland does fall within that grouping, and those would be consistent with the FY 2020 limits. This slide here just shows you what the average monthly cost is for a renter in Rockland. The average is anywhere between $1,000 and about $1,500. And based on that average rental amount, we estimate that we could assist up to 40 local households. And again, that number might vary depending on how many months of assistance or the exact rental payments an applicant has. This is just discussion of proposed guidelines. The selection for participants would be via a lottery selection. This would allow, this is kind of, I don't think the most fair option, but allows us to, it allows everybody to submit an application and, you know, minimizes the appearance of any type of discrimination or the race to get an application in. Suggested that the program run for a 12-month period. It would be a grant program, so there would be no expectation that the funds would ever be repaid by that household. It has to be a renter that has a documented lease or lease agreement. Unfortunately, under CPA regulations, households are not eligible unless there is a pre-existing affordable housing restriction on the property. And the reason for that is typically a house could be, we could provide them mortgage assistance, but that household could, there would be nothing from stopping that household from turning around and selling the property at market rate. And the funds are really geared towards affordable housing, and we would not be able to recapture that funding. Again, the household would have to document their income and that it doesn't exceed the allowable limits. There's been discussion maximum assistance being either 2 months or 3 months, and there's some time to kind of work out the details of the program guidelines. One word of advice from the affordable housing world is to be as flexible as possible in the program. This will allow us, depending on from the time it's approved and the money is able to hit the ground, any other additional funding that may be made available either through federal funds or state funds, we can be flexible in being able to leverage other funding with the CPA money. Payments would be made directly to the landlord. So we wouldn't write a check over to the renter. It would go to the landlord. Some other things that are being considered would be negotiating with the landlord to have that landlord reduce the renter's rent payments for a period of time, or where possible, having a household contribute to their rental payments. As I previously mentioned, the Board of Selectmen did vote unanimously to support the program, as did the Community Preservation Committee, and ultimately it would be a vote at town meeting to allocate those CPA funds, which would be in the amount of $85,000 to the program. We would hire a third-party program administrator, which is allowable under CPA rules, and it's advisable for this program. It is a little bit administratively heavy, and I don't think that we could handle that internally, because it requires marketing the program, doing income verification, and these are things that, for example, our community development block grant administrators already do as a matter of their work. And I will share with you just a quote that I came upon when putting this together. We rise by lifting others, and I think this is really specific to the use of CPA funds where they're community funds, and this is a unique ability for the town to use its own funding to put right back into the community to support local residents and the local economy. And so I'll take any questions if there are any, or turn it over to John.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. In terms of housing costs, is that just strictly rent?
Yes.
Okay. And then this program's available to all renters in the town of Rockland?
It's available to eligible renters, so they would have to meet the income qualifications, that they're 100% of the area median income or lower. And just to give you an example of what that might look like for Rockland. So for a family of 4, it's a total household income of $113,300 or less. But again, the other qualifying factor would be that they have suffered an economic hardship due to the COVID pandemic.
Thank you.
Hey, Jen, what are the costs looking like to administer the program, and is that going to come out of the 85,000 that we've got for a pool, or are we looking to fund that some other way to be able to help more people or help people longer?
Yeah, so the funds for the administrator would come out of the 85,000. It's estimated it would be at about $10,000. So it's typically a cost about $225 per household to do that administrative work and the marketing piece for the program, which the marketing piece is an affirmative fair housing requirement. So we can't forego, we wouldn't want to forego that either. The other money that's coming from the federal through the state programs is Community Development Block Grant CV, so COVID related funding. There is going to be a rental and mortgage assistance program in that, totaling $10 million for the entire Commonwealth. The agency that administers that money is the Department of Housing and Community Development, and they are working with an existing program known as RAFT in the state. And so hopefully they're not taking specific applications from communities, and we're still waiting on guidance on how they're going to be administering that program. So hopefully some of those funds will be able to leverage. It is outside of the crisis. It is a program that runs out of money very quickly. And last I knew, we had about a year's waiting list. So we're also waiting to hear on how the state will handle that piece in administering the additional funding.
Okay, thank you. And then one more, so the program, we're going to say it's for a year, but when's the lottery happen if we're only going to do a month or 2 or maybe 3, but what's the lottery time frame? Is that going to go to, August 1st, say, and then we'll be able to help out the people that got selected, or
yes,
if we don't have 40 people, we can continue to roll and keep it going through the end of the 12-month period?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Baron, I think the earliest we could, have any money hit the ground, although with the lottery and the marketing, it's not likely, would be July 1st. And this is a situation that's been ongoing since, mid-March. So we may see 40 applicants, we may see 80 applicants. It'll also, doing a lottery will also enable us to have or create a wait list so that if there is additional money that we can access, we could just start working off that wait list and reaching out to those families.
So Jen, just so I'm clear too, there's no matching funds at this time to this 85,000. I know in the past with CPA, we occasionally, depending on what it is, we've gotten some funds from the state. But there's no matching funds. This 85 is coming right out of our CPA balance, right?
Correct. There are no matching funds, but having a program in place will help us to leverage other additional funding that may become available. We're all keeping a pretty close eye on it. I think that the HEROES Act, again, from the federal government, the additional stimulus package might have some rental and mortgage assistance. There's no knowing if that will go forward or, you know, the entire package will go forward.
And there's no, what about if somebody is chosen as part of the lottery and they're going to get the assistance, you know, what if the landlord says, hey, this back due rent, is this money just, in other words, if we send them money, it's great, that pays the back due, we're still kicking them out. I mean, or is there like requirements around that? Did I miss that part?
Yeah, no, you didn't miss that part. The negotiation with the landlord would be to not evict. We're certainly not going to evict, make a rental payment to a landlord that's planning on evicting a household. So typically, you know, there might be an additional they can't evict right now until the 45 days after the emergency declaration is lifted. So we don't know, and that's a very common question. But typically there would be an agreement with the landlord that says, you know, you're accepting this rental payment in consideration of not evicting this household. Ultimately, does that household get evicted? That is a possibility. From the housing world, the advocates will tell you that the benefit in that scenario is that household is a little more stabilized. It is less money that they then owe a landlord. I know that's not the ideal or perfect answer, but it is a possibility. But like I said, it would not, the rental payments would not be made to a landlord that is planning to evict a tenant.
All right. Any other discussion or questions on the program? All right. So I believe that the request was for the finance committee to make a vote on that or do something to that degree. So Biz, is there some particular language you need to use, or what do we need to do in this?
You know, as a formality, it is to approve the CPC use of housing appropriation to fund the housing rental during the COVID pandemic. Something to that nature will do.
So use of CPC funds.
Mm-hmm. It's housing allocation to assist in rental during the COVID pandemic. And then we'll get the legalese down pat. We'll be writing the motion, etc. for it.
I'll make the motion for the finance committee to approve.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve the use of CPC funds as towards housing to assist with the rental program as proposed by Jen this evening, and we have a motion by Craig and a second by Bobby. All in favor?
Is that Bob McDonald you're talking about?
That's Bob McDonald. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Jeff held up a piece of paper. I think that means I. I can't read it, but
Yep.
yay! All right, perfect. All right, so that is a vote. Okay, is that all we needed, Biz?
Yes. Yep.
Thanks. Hey, Jen, great work on this. I know there's a lot went into that, but positioning Rockland to kind of get some additional assistance is much needed. So that's great. It's good news.
Thank you, John. And the
Thanks,
committee.
Jim.
All right. So with that, let me turn it over to Biz. You've sent us out quite a few documents, and just, directionally, where do we want to go? Do we want to review any of those documents? I also have a PowerPoint that Doug, so either Doug or Biz could respond. Doug, you had sent out a PowerPoint that was presented to the selectmen. What did you want me to walk through next?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Biz, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you
I
have
would
to
like
start?
Doug to take the lead, and then I will back up with any questions because he has his files ready to go.
All right,
Okay,
thanks.
you're welcome.
Yeah, so we had like 5 things we were hoping you guys could do tonight, and you just knocked off one of them, which is the CPA article that Jen presented. All the rest are other budget-related things. So why don't I start by just very quickly going through the PowerPoint that I shared with the school department and the Board of Selectmen, and then that'll kind of help frame things. So I can share my screen if that's all right, John. All right, can you guys all see that?
Yeah.
All right, great. So I'm going to do this kind of quick because, again, the original purpose of this was to help communicate with Dr. Cron and his team and some of the school committee members, excuse me, just to make sure we were all on the same page. So this was done about, 12 days ago now. Time goes by quickly. So that most of the beginning of this, I'm going to go through very quickly because, a couple weeks ago when Biz and I were preparing our updated forecasts, which were predicting very large revenue deficits, we just thought it would be helpful for the schools to understand where we're coming from, why such dire forecasts. This slide was just showing the huge spike in unemployment. At the time I did this, it was over 33.5 million people filed for unemployment. And folks at the Fed were talking about true unemployment numbers approaching 24% in our economy, which is just staggering. As it relates to our FY20 projected revenue deficit, I think we've shared this with you guys in the past. It's approximately $1.3 million. And again, I know there's confusion from some folks out in the community that may have heard about this, but it's a revenue deficit. So it's not that spending was out of control or people were overspending. It was just because of the economic shutdown. You can see on the left-hand side where all the projected shortfalls are coming from: taxes, motor vehicle excise, rooms tax, meals tax, etc. On the right-hand side, those are the actions that were taken to close the deficit. We don't need votes from you, but I do want to just be transparent with it so you guys can see what we're doing. The top 4 lines on that right-hand side is all basically scooping up revenues that are unbudgeted that we'll have in hand that normally we would just hang on to and it would ultimately turn into free cash. But right now we just need every penny we can to close the deficit. We're going to be using additional amounts of free cash that, excuse me, we were hoping to have used for other purposes. So 200,000 that we were setting aside for an emergency, the emergency is now upon us. We were hoping to put in 75,000 into stabilization. That was something that the Finance Committee, I know, was keen about in the past. And we had 150,000 left over that we, in the worst case, had set aside for possible snow and ice use, but the winter's behind us, so that's available. And then a big number, 467,000 for turnbacks, closing articles, spending freezes, all that sort of thing. And then lastly, furloughs, which I know you've heard about. We've had to furlough 35 people on the town general government side, which is about half and half completely furloughed, working 0 hours, the other half working reduced hours. These numbers are in flux a little bit. The actual savings from the furloughs is less than 100,000. But the savings from closing articles and turnbacks is going to be higher. But in the end, we're going to make sure that we close the deficit. So that was that part. And when the schools, just to be clear, when the schools have talked about, they've done a lot of furloughs on their side as well. But I'm focusing here just on the general fund deficit. Talking about how your numbers are changing, we're getting new information all the time. And at the time we did this, we were hoping we'd get more detail from the state and from DESE about potential school aid impacts. We've been talking to Senator Keenan, Rep. DeCoste, everybody we can about our understanding of the state economy, the state budget, and potential state aid, because that is the largest driver for us. What we're told is the state could be as high as $1 billion deficit in the current year, FY20. They could potentially have a $5 billion deficit next year in FY21. They won't have a consensus revenue out for a few weeks. They'll most likely do 1/12 budgets, a 1/12 budget in July, and most likely won't have the state budget in place until August. And just looking back in history, as they were comparing to the 9C cuts in that time, they basically said expect it to be as bad or worse than that. And specifically, they said expect cuts to local aid in Chapter 70. So that was exactly what we did not want to hear, but that's what we've been told. Biz has also been reaching out, extensively with the Department of Revenue, and this was just some direct quotes from emails she sent, and it's really that very bottom line from the DOR is what's relevant here. DOR put in writing to us, be prepared for something less than what you thought you were going to get before the COVID pandemic. So the last point was, in addition, we've been talking to the auditor, who's also recommending project decreased state aid, basically 10% less than what we had been projecting, something similar to the FY19 level. Mass Taxpayers Association and others say it could be even worse, but we're sticking with a 10% reduction. So this is all just sort of forming the context, the backdrop for where we're getting our information for these projections. So we're projecting a $2.8 million revenue deficit for next year. And you can see the real big part of that is state aid, and it's a huge unknown. But again, just as the previous slide showed, this is what we think is a reasonable assumption at this time. We'll get into the calculation in a minute, but I wanted to be clear with the schools so we were all on the same page about what the schools portion is and what the town portion is. And you notice it's not 70-30 here on this slide, because this number on the town side includes all the other shared expenses like health insurance and pensions and debt, etc. We don't need to get into this really too much here, but we are always clear, since Biz and I have started, to share the actual calculation on any 70-30 split with the schools, so there's no misunderstanding. We never thought we'd be doing it for a cut like this. It's, the intent of it was to share revenue, not to, but this is the other side of that coin. So this is where that $1.4 million school number comes from. We also wanted just to be clear with the schools on what exactly we think the appropriations need to be, how they need to change. So you can see the top line was the original school, the town contribution to the public school budget that everybody had previously approved, then the 1.4 million reduction, what the new appropriation needs to be. Similarly, on the general government side, our $654,000 that we need to cut, then what our new appropriation is, and then we have. Our recommendation is to use other sources of funding to close approximately $787,000 gap. And this slide shows how we're making up that 787 using 500,000 from stabilization, and then additional amount from overlay dog fund, and taking money out of the OPEB trust. So again, we're trying to balance, using some of our quote unquote rainy day funds to help minimize really bad operational cuts, but not going so crazy that we don't have anything left up for any future bad days in the future. And then the last slide was just a calendar that, again, at the time I shared this with the school department, that this was really critical just to make sure that we were all on the same page as far as what things needed to look like, when things needed to get done to move forward with a June 22nd town meeting, which the Board of Selectmen last night did formally vote to hold town meeting on June 22nd. So I had the Selectmen's meeting last night. We're meeting with you folks tonight. If need be, which I don't think it will need this, but there is that first week of June to have an additional meeting. The board did vote affirmatively on everything we presented, so we don't need to go back to the Board of Selectmen for any budget related items. And then ultimately by June 8th is the absolutely positively last day that we can physically post the warrant. So obviously all the work needs to be done far in advance of that to rewrite the warrant and finalize the numbers and have it all, reviewed for legal consistency, etc. And obviously during this whole period of time from when I met with the schools all the way up until that June 3rd date, the school department's doing their thing on their budget. So this is just a very quick kind of high level sort of how we got to where we are. You'll see on the left side, I talked about how this is assuming a June 22nd town meeting, not doing the 1/12 budget in July. We talked about this extensively. We've gone round and round on it, but ultimately, we don't think that a 1/12 budget's really going to get us anything, because we can't make any different assumptions. You can't just make up, oh, we're going to get 2 million more in state aid and have a crazy 1/12 budget. It has to be realistic, based on all the same assumptions approved by DOR. So we really think it's in our best interest to have town meeting before June 30th, close out all our FY20 issues. And then as I'll get into, when I get into the numbers later, we'll most likely need to have a special town meeting sometime like later in the summer, early fall, to clean up a few things. But this is basically the presentation I shared. Do you have any questions on this before I get into more detail on the numbers? No? Okay.
Yeah.
Makes
I
sense.
think, I think that you laid it out pretty well. Curious to see, the impact of the individual departments, which we got
Yep.
some, on already. So
Yeah, so why don't I get right into that? So this sheet is and again, you guys have all of these files, and I, apologize for not being able to get it to you sooner, but I needed to make sure to get this stuff cleared through a selectmen's meeting, before I took it further. But this is getting into a little bit more of the detail. So you see the original budget that everybody approved on the left. And I know I've probably said this before, but this whole thing just kills me and kills Biz, because we were all so proud collectively of having everything done far in advance, so that nobody would have to scramble at the last minute. And sure enough, the pandemic hits, and believe me, we are scrambling, and we're trying to get a lot done in a very short period of time, and to give us time to button everything up before we get to the warrant. So it's just a bitter pill to swallow. But here you see, the original revenue projections, the $2.8 million reduction that we're anticipating. And then you see the $787,000 that I spoke about earlier. And then I'll come back to this additional $130,000 that we need in a minute. But so this is getting to what the new budget number is. Again, the 787, other sources of revenue that we need to close the budget. Already spoke about that in the PowerPoint. So then scrolling down, you see the school department number, the $1.4 million number. I'm obviously not going to have any details there, because that's not my job. That's up to the school superintendent and the school committee on how they're going to manage that.
do we know how that affects South Shore? The voc tech?
So this is just the town contribution to the Rockland Public Schools. We don't have any different number right now for South Shore VOTEC. Biz, that's correct, right?
Correct. The budget is as presented. At this point, there's been no change. In order for them to make a change, they would have to go to the collective communities and have a meeting with the collective community. So the VOTEX and the agricultural school have not changed. And this is just Rockland Public Schools.
But the reality is
Mhm.
shouldn't they be expecting that they do need to change to kind of contribute to the overall, kind of righting the ship?
No, because they have their own ship to write. The agricultural schools per pupil is roughly 23,000 and change. And the VOTEC per pupil is roughly 18,000 and change. These are figures that are handed down through DESE. And then whatever they had originally had for capital payments, et cetera, become part of the process. We're trying to verify the number of students. But as we know, the number of students can change even after school opens. So they are a definite variable. And at this point in time, it's not prudent to change it. If we find out come December, which is usually when we know that students have dropped out, or their population for the town of Rockland has gone down, then we can deal with maybe reassessing some of that money in other areas, but it's not something we can do right now.
I believe some of their money that was being spent, proposed to be spent, was for capital projects. And
Correct.
that's it's kind of just like we're
Right.
taking back some articles to
Right.
get this, in order.
Right.
Why wouldn't they be using some of those funds? I don't know if they can or
Yeah.
not, to
Right.
reduce the
Right.
impact in each town.
Right, I do understand that, but we have a regional school for the VOTEC. We have representatives for the VOTEC. And just like the school committee, they have to go to their bodies, the representative bodies, to have everything revoted, just like the school department, just like the town does. So we have no additional information from them. We could go in and insist, well, you're going to cut your budget. It doesn't mean that they will or they can. You know, they're also subject to some Chapter 70 funding as well. So let's just hope it doesn't go in the opposite area where they need more funding. I'm going to say it's not, but it's best to leave the budgets as they are. They have to vote. They let us know what we have with the regional school district. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think that might be one of the things too, where I talked about how we'll most likely need to have a special town meeting, later. So, there's going to be a lot of variables that could be changing. I'll talk about a couple of the others, and of course the state budget and, assessments like that are certainly one of them. So, but I agree with Biz. I mean, we don't have any basis to assume anything right now, and we're trying to be realistic. So this is a summary of all the general government cuts. There's two other documents which you guys now have, and I will bring up on the screen, which gets into line by line each individual department. But the big picture is what I was trying to accomplish was to have all these reductions total $654,000. That was my objective. The principles that I was trying to go by were, to be cognizant of the fact that, I've been learning more how, the town has made great strides and made a lot of improvements in the budget over the years to, better staff certain departments and better more appropriately fund certain things. But even with all that, I've said it repeatedly, and you guys have brought it up as well. There's a lot of departments that we don't even have. They don't even exist. A planning department, a facilities department, a natural resources department don't even exist. So my point in saying that is, while there's been great strides made to better fund certain things, we're also very, very thin. There is not fat in the general government operating budget to cut. So my objective here was to not lay off any positions that were currently filled. So that was a big existing objective that I had. In these reductions, we are not filling some positions that were funded but were unfilled. And so an example that's in the fire department, because they're civil service, they had funding to bring another one of their groups up to 7 personnel. They hadn't actually filled that position because of the civil service delays. That's something that we were forced to cut. But again, it wasn't actually taking a firefighter off the road. Other examples of things we're doing while we're not laying people off, we are changing a full-time position, a junior clerk position in the tax collector's office from full-time to part-time. So, these are difficult things to do. In the parks department, we're eliminating the summer part-time staff. And I should have highlighted as well from the beginning that all the cuts that you're seeing here were not arbitrarily determined by me or Biz. We met with all department heads, explained the problem, and we charged the department heads with coming up with potential reductions that they could live with that wouldn't destroy their ability to produce core services. So this is what we got from department heads, and then we worked, with them. And for example, the police department also, had proposed, to be honest, more cuts than I was comfortable doing just for public safety purposes. So what we end up doing in the police department, you'll see in the detail, but we're essentially delaying funding 2 of the recruits that are going to be going into the academy. But again, I don't feel comfortable taking cops off the road right now. So, we went through this exercise as much as we could do. And I did fall short, and I came up with 524,000. And rather than cut really to the bone where I'm closing the library a few days a week and taking cops and firefighters off the road, what we came up with, and I'm going to call it the next document to come up with 130,000 is through our capital. So what we're doing here, this first column is what we all had previously agreed on, which was funding call it $980,000 worth of capital articles. What we're looking at doing now is taking 2 of the articles. Everything that I'm talking about now is going to be highlighted in yellow. 2 of the fire articles we're looking to lease instead of outright purchase. So that lowers the FY21 expense, that frees up some cash. We're going to just completely put off the highway dump truck. We're going to cut the IT investment in equipment and upgrades, cut that in half. And we're only going to do 1 cruiser instead of 2 cruisers. And we're going to cut the town projects, which I essentially use as a facilities budget, by $10,000. So all that more than generates the 130,000 that I needed to be able to hit my number.
Doug, just if I may, on that
Yeah.
capital, you'll note that the school on the lease of the new vans, they decided that they would pick up that 12,000 in their budget, which
Right.
I just wanted to point that out. We'll carry the rest of it, but the new lease, they opted to take it in their budget. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Biz. That's a good point. So that, you know, the school is still getting all of their capital accomplished. But we are, you know, restructuring some things, cutting other things, completely eliminating other things to generate that small amount that we need to close the gap. Now, an important point I want to make here, and this is something that is very interesting, is Chief Duffy in the fire department has been working for a while on a potential grant from the state 911 committee that can help offset expenses for our regional dispatch services. So that's something that was in the works. And then ultimately we weren't eligible because of the time frames involved. We had already re-upped for a 3-year contract and we were just not going to be eligible. So the chief, I give him great credit. He really pounded it hard with the 911 committee and ultimately got them to actually retroactively change the dates, change the requirements, essentially so that Rockland can qualify. And what we're being told informally is we're going to get the grant. It's a reimbursement grant, but of course, everything's timing. We're not going to get the official word when we need it before June 30th. It's going to happen sometime later in July. So we can't bank on that now. I wish I could, because that would have taken care of half of my reductions I'd have to do here, but we can't bank on it yet. So this is one of the other reasons why I'm talking about the likelihood for a special town meeting sometime later summer, early fall, because once we get that grant, and I feel very confident that we will, that's going to fully cover our regional dispatch expense for $309,000. So when we're able to get that, we also most likely should wait for the state budget to pass in August, which is what we're assuming. Let's just say hypothetically now there's nothing radically different from our assumptions compared to the state budget. We could, at a special town meeting, make adjustments so that this 130,000, you know, Biz can explain mechanically how the accounting would work, but essentially we could restore that $130,000 use of free cash so that when we adjust our expenses, that 130 can ultimately return back to free cash. And then with the other amount of that reimbursement grant, there's even other reductions that we could potentially restore. Again, all things being equal in the state budget. Realistically though, the state budget is probably going to be something different than what we're projecting here. Could be better, could be worse, and we'll have to make those other adjustments as well. And then the last document that I'm prepared to share, and we emailed you, is all the detail behind every single change. Now, one thing I do want to highlight, and I know we've talked about this before, in the Board of Selectmen's budget, I know it looked like a huge jump year to year, but again, I was hired at $160,000. I think what town meeting passed was $150,000, but I was actually hired at $160,000. So I was slated to get a $4,000 raise. I'm not going to take a raise. So that's one small piece of some of the reductions here. One thing I do want to highlight though, as it relates to all other department head salaries, you know, there are some towns that are able to essentially just freeze salaries, get zeros for everybody. And as I've been investigating that, the only towns that are really able to do that are those that have union contracts that are expiring June 30th. So they're just saying nobody's getting more than zero because we can't afford it. And their non-union employees either, you know, don't have contracts or, you know, have contracts that are all expiring. And so we're the exact opposite. We have union contracts that are all going through all of next year. And I have lots of department heads that have multi-year individual employment contracts that carry them through next year. And while I want to be really clear that there were a number of department heads that did voluntarily, when they gave us their budget cuts, say, they're willing to take a zero. I didn't get that from everyone. And I just don't have time to figure out how to even bring this up with the union and how to negotiate something like this with so many separate individual employment agreements. So what I did in this budget is I took a zero for me, and for folks that have individual employment contracts that go through next year, I gave them whatever their agreement calls for. There were a couple of other department heads that we had spoken about that were slated to get more significant increases for market corrections, just a couple people that were really out of whack. Those I can't afford to do, and I've spoken to those people about it, so I've taken those out and just given them and everybody else the 2.5%. So I just wanted to explain to you kind of what my thought process was, and certainly if we get really much worse news in another month or two with the state budget, and we're going to have to go back to the well again, then I'm probably going to really have to twist some arms and get people with employment agreements, in effect, and the unions to agree to a freeze. But it's not something I'm really able to do in this very condensed time frame. So I'm not going to go through each specific line. A general theme you'll see is, we're cutting, whether it's, dues, professional, continuing education, that type of thing. We can certainly go through this more later. I'm trying to think if there's any big items. This is one thing we should probably talk about now, data processing. I mentioned earlier that there were, 5 things we wanted to have you guys vote on tonight, and you already voted one of them, the CPA. The other one is this one right here under data processing. So this is the kind of thing where people always say, run it like a business. And I only wish we could, because the state rules make it impossible. So what Gino wants to do, which I fully support, and he's on the phone to give additional detail if you have it, is we currently rent our VoIP phone system, voice over internet protocol phones. He's come up with a proposal that we can upgrade to a better system, a more modern, more reliable, better system with a 3-year lease purchase at lower cost than what he's currently spending out of his operating budget. So he doesn't need any more money. He has the funding in his budget to do it. But the way the state laws change with the Municipal Modernization Act, anytime you do any lease purchase, that has to be an individual article at town meeting with a 2/3 vote. So that would be an additional article. And that's why we've kind of, there's a sort of broken it out here separately. But I just want to be clear that this particular article that we do want you to vote on to support a 3-year lease purchase for the phone system does not require additional funding. And it's on the contrary, it's actually a savings.
Well, the way that works, Doug, I think, is normally when we vote at town meeting, the department budgets come up first. So this department budget, even if we vote it and approve it, and the town votes and approve it, this budget is set up so it's assuming that the article is going to pass. So is the article going to be in the special town meeting?
No, I don't think so.
This will be just like the regular lease agreements, where all we're doing is we're not going to be authorizing any funding. We're just going to be authorizing the lease agreement. So if the town says we're not going to do the lease agreement, then the money stays in the budget for IT so that they can continue with the current phone system that we have. So it's a special article only to approve the lease itself.
Right.
Does that make sense?
So I understand.
Yeah.
If my question though is that if we vote the budget before the article and the article doesn't pass for whatever reason, we'd have to go back and reopen the department budget to put the 3,565 back in, or we would just live with what it comes up with.
No, the 3,565, that's Gino's budgetary reduction. What we did is we took his computer services line and we split it. He was going to have the 186, but we split it between computer services at 162, and we wanted to show the telephone lease on a separate line so it was clear for all of you, so that you could see that the lease is there. So it's not something you have to revote. It's just approving the language, allowing the town to enter into a 3-year lease for telephone equipment. And this is going to replace the prior lease and prior issues that we have.
And similarly, if I just go back to the free cash, we have the same thing with these two fire vehicles that we spoke about earlier. So those would be the other two ones that we need to vote. Let me get back to here. So that's IT. Trying to think of what the other significant, you know, I mean, we're literally cutting wherever we can, you know, printing return reports. I mean, just looking for anything. This is the fire dispatch that I was talking about. It's this $309,000 line that we're hoping we'll be able to get this reimbursement grant, which is, you know, dedicated to offset that specific general government expense. You can see the police reductions. Again, this was the line where, you know, in talking to Chief Llewellyn, if we're in dire circumstances and we, you know, need to lower this number even further, but I'm just not prepared to do that at this time, given that we have other ways to skin the cat.
So Doug, the 309,000 we're not planning for in the budget. If the 309,000 does come through with the fire department, will it be, because you mentioned retroactive, will it affect FY21 budget?
Yes.
And if it does, what's the plan for the $309,000 if we do
Sure.
get-
Yep. So my understanding is, yes, it would be for FY21. So that's why I said we would need to hold a special town meeting to address this, as well as most likely changes from the state budget. So then as it related to this, we would now have a reimbursement grant to cover that expense. So we wouldn't need a general fund to cover that expense. I'd like to undo the $130,000 that we were using from free cash, and then potentially offset some of these other, restore some of the other funding with some of that remaining funds. Again, assuming we have the ability to do that, because we don't need it for, you know, any other state reductions. This is all assuming the state doesn't whack us even more and there's not another huge hit that we have. So that's how it would happen. It would be at a special town meeting.
Okay.
Talked a little bit about police. Fire, again, you see this line here. This is not filling a currently unfilled but funded position. And it's, you know, it's certainly disappointing for the chief, because he's really wanted to get all his groups up to 7, and, you know, now we're going the other way. Small potatoes and emergency management. You know, these kind of cuts are tough, like in the, you know, in the tree department, you know, we just, you know, we had to generate as much savings as possible. And so when we do things like this, just like in highway, obviously we're going to be providing less services to the public, but it's what we're going to have to do. Again, here's the school's number. That's for them to determine how they do that. Here's a highway, part of a highway reduction I mentioned earlier. Again, this is all hired, outsourced, you know, equipment and labor, and it's just, they're going to get less.
So
They're going to get less done.
in the past, the school department has come forward with articles. Like, for example, they're looking at, you know, that one of their articles was was generally for the equipment, computers, things like that, is one of their articles that they have in every year.
Yep, I have that here. Yep, there's standing technology. I think my understanding is that's more important than ever for them now, because of, you know, remote learning that they're probably going to have to continue with. So my understanding is that's still very important to them.
So they're going to try and close their budget items, and they're not going to come back to the town and say, you know, we need another article to close, you know, gaps in our budget, and we need to take some of the free cash. Is that just,
No,
is that
I understand.
discussed? And
I understand your question, and that's exactly why we did this whole presentation, and we went through all these numbers with them, including, you know, all our uses of free cash to close FY20, what we need for FY21, and all the articles we're going to have. And we've been completely transparent, and I believe we're all on the same page. You know, they've been, I can't stress enough how positive the relationship's been with Colleen and Jane and Dr. Cron. I feel like we have an excellent relationship. I don't think there's any misunderstanding. And again, going back to this, that was part of why we took the pains to put the exact numbers in, like, this is what you have to hit, this is what you have to cut. And I believe everybody is on the same page. Again, not knowing what the state's going to do in their final budget, but we have to be measured in what we estimate. We don't want to be so aggressive that we cut to the bone if we don't need to. But similarly, we can't be unrealistic and think we're not going to get whacked when all indications are we are going to get whacked.
And if I may, Doug, on the, once we set the town meeting, which will be tonight, once you all vote, then we're done with 21 until we have to make adjustments, like Doug said, in the fall. And our position right now is we don't know what's going to happen. We may, hopefully we'll get money in and we can increase the budgets versus decrease the budgets. But any department at any time can come in and request a capital purchase. That could be the fire department or the police department coming back and say, okay, we now got free cash. I want to get my second cruiser in that I tabled. I want to get my dump truck in that I tabled. But that's an analytical process that we have to deal with when that time comes. And similarly, all the departments worked very, very hard on this. And there's a lot of internal things that have to happen, and we're all working together to achieve the goal. So we worked with the school, we kept their articles intact, and because they always have the technology, and if you look at the capital, the other 3 items there, they're all lease agreements that have been in place for several years. And some of these lease agreements are going to be closing out. Each year over the next several years they'll be closing out, but the capital is there to help us pay for things that we can't budget for. So I just want to be clear that anybody could come back at any time, but typically you don't do this part of your budgeting until the spring. And that would probably be the smart thing to do going forward based on the unknowns going into 21.
Thank you, Biz. One thing I wanted to highlight in the Council on Aging, this was a really innovative sort of proposal that Peg came up with at the Senior Center, which is she has an administrative a receptionist who's retiring. So what this involves is essentially not filling. I talked about how we're not doing layoffs, but this would be essentially attrition, not filling that position. Other staff, is going to be picking up the slack, and this is something that not ideal, but Peggy thinks is still going to work. We made sure that we're not really materially affecting the kitchen, because that's something that they're really working hard with food. One important thing to note here in the Youth Commission is you see there's a big number there for summer staff, 35,000. We didn't touch it because we're hoping still that there's going to be some type of summer programs that the Youth Commission is going to offer, because doesn't appear yet that everything is completely canceled. But this is another example. There's a lot of different things at play. Again, if the state budget comes up, worse in the summer, and they're not able to do some of these programs, this $35,000 line would be something that we would certainly need to revisit.
So if I'm not missing this, Doug, I've thumbed through here, and I appreciate some of the adjustments that you made in your salary, and Jen, both of you guys took a hit, and I think that's great to see. It also looks like one of the lowest paid directors that had put in for a raise to kind of bring her back up, which is the Youth Commission, bring her up to something that's reasonable. Yep. She took a huge hit on her raise. Yep. And for the most part, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, the other department heads took nothing, took no hit.
Yeah.
So I just want to point that out. I think it's disappointing, that's the direction that they chose to go, because they have the right, they signed their contract, we signed their contract, they got it, but there's always opportunity for them to make an adjustment.
I know. And so let me just be clear though, John, just so you know, there are many department heads that did offer to take zeros, and part of what I don't want you to think that anybody getting a raise didn't offer to take a zero, because many of them did. But my dilemma was not 100% of them did. And so I didn't want to get into a thing where I put in, I'm making up a number, 6 department heads are doing zeros because they're really taking one for the team, and then others aren't. And then it just creates this big dysfunction and people pointing fingers and so I was trying to avoid that. For me, this is like one perfect example of why I hate individual employment agreements, especially multi-year individual employment agreements, because I wish I just had the ability to just tell everybody we're all taking zeros and that's that. But I just want you to know that just because I made the executive decision to give everybody what's in their contract or, 2.5%. And I'm taking the 0 for myself because I didn't want to start splitting things. Again, if I have to go back and try to cut more, if the state budget comes in worse, then I'm going to really try to twist some arms. But the thing I need to impress upon you is this is all in such a compressed time frame that it's something that, normally I might want to take weeks or months to do. I have hours. So that's where that's at. Does that make sense? You hear what I'm
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
saying?
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
Doug, I had a question about the summer programming. So I know that you said that if we get worse numbers later on and those things don't happen, we can revisit it. Is that something that, because again, we don't know when we're going to, not only do we not know what the news is going to be for everything, we don't know when we're going to get the news for anything. What happens if we find out, okay, no summer programming this year, but it's before we even get information about the state budget, if it happens in that sequence, basically?
So I think your question is, what happens if we find out, let's say in July, that we're not doing any summer programs, and then the state budget comes in August? Well, then, so I think what happens is, okay, we're now able to not hire these people. So we have $35,000 of savings, which, we might need to help if we need an additional cuts later when the state budget comes out. This budget is so tight. You know what I mean? There's so many things that are very tight that that would be even though it'd be terrible for families not to have summer programming options, that would be a financial problem I'd love to have if I had that, if I had that flexibility. But I think the timing will kind of work because we're going to know, we're going to have to know, sometime in June what the deal is going to be, for the summer. And then, but we have to lock down the warrant before then. Everything's timing, you know what I mean? There's like the timing is just very complicated.
That's just what I was thinking though, is that we would definitely know about summer programming before anything else. So, but. Right,
but it'll be after we have to lock the warrant down. That's the issue.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I'll be shocked if our projections on state aid come in to the penny. I think things are going to be different. We're going to have to make some adjustments one way or the other. Yeah, Craig, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry about that. The retirements, you mentioned the Council of Aging, and then I know there was one in the fire department. Are there any extra retirements that we didn't anticipate when we made this that we're going to end up paying out a higher sick time or vacation time buybacks and all of that? That's going to
I think there's one additional in the fire department that we were just made aware of, and so I think that's another one. Des, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's going to be tight, right?
Typically the retirements or the contract buyout is in the special article that we have for 2020. So our goal is that we will cover that. We have 2 retirements. Well, as you know, the library director, Beverly Brown, just retired. We have 2 fire department retirements happening. One's happening on June 30, and the second one's happening on July 15th. So there is a financial obligation. We have funding to cover those financial obligations, but as you know, as the year goes on, you don't know who else is going to retire. So that's something that we'll have to keep in the back of our minds going forward.
Right. Are any of the department heads anticipating additional people now that, this is going on? Some of the guys are like, forget it, I'm out. And and now's a good time, or no?
No, that's a personnel issue that we really can't discuss until they put in their papers and say they're going to retire. For us to answer to that, it would be hearsay and not a fact. So it's not prudent to do that at this time. Now, in 2009, the state came up with an early retirement system. Could they potentially do it this time? I don't know. And that's something that will be, looked at if and when it should come about.
Okay. And then my other question with some of the furloughing and reduction of hours and all of that, and I know things are thin, because if you're losing hours, man hours, how do you get the work done? But is there any talk to, pooling resources together so that a couple departments, so as Department A is busy at the beginning of the month, Department B is busy at the end of the month, we can shift bodies around as needed to cover the demands? Or do the contracts and the unions, are you locked into, this is my position and that's all I can do is, flip the switch A and B and not turn the knobs C and D?
Yeah. It's interesting. There's again, I kind of go back to we're already so thinly staffed that I don't even know what department would have the excess capacity to do it. I mean, as people are furloughed, or I should say before people were furloughed, but once people had to start working remotely, we did just that. We had somebody that make up a hypothetical, somebody in the assessing department, a junior clerk in the assessing department really wasn't able to effectively do her assessing job remotely, but she could help out other departments with some work they had going, and we absolutely did that. So that's generally for sure. But it's again, we don't have enough excess to really have that be kind of like a long-term strategy. I mean, I'll give you two good examples right off the top of my head. Our HR department is one person. Our IT department is one person. That they both need additional people in their departments. And that's just what we're working with.
Well, I was thinking more like in line with the tax collector going down part-time, that person going down part-time. Is there somebody in the accounting or the treasury department that could help fill in some of these gaps, and or not? They can live with the current environment, though.
No, I know what you're saying. I get it. And I think that's part of my thing is those departments are also, where I came from in Sandwich, we had, 4 people in our treasurer's office. In Rockland, we only have 3. And so there's less excess capacity to be able to do that. But we always look at that. I just call them efficiencies. And that's definitely something that I don't, shy away from.
If I may, Doug, the municipal finance laws call for separation of duties. So some of the duties can't be crossed. So an accountant can't take responsibility for a collector or treasurer position. So those are things we would have to take into play. For instance, Annette works in the collector's office. She couldn't come and help me out in the accountant's office because they can touch cash, we can't. So those laws have to come into play before any decisions like that can be made.
Okay. My other question was around the incoming tax receipts, and I know when this first started, we were projecting some losses there. Now that we've gone through that quarter cycle, are we seeing more receipts than we anticipated? Are we seeing less receipts than we anticipated?
I think
Biz
is better positioned to answer that than me.
We're still saying less than anticipated. I was looking at the revenues today in preparation for our weekly finance meeting. So, we are still on track to get in less taxation at this time. Okay. I wish I could give you more positive news, but.
Well, I figured it was going to be less, but is it less than we anticipated and it's coming up, or are we pretty close with our estimates that we were?
Well, at this point, our estimates are working on projections through June 30. I think our projections will be close. And I would hate to say, well, we're going to get more or we're going to get less. It's going to be close. And to take the conservative approach right now for everything we're going through, I know I say conservative, but it's the best way that we can handle the situation right now, because our goal, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we want to close 2020 in the black.
Yeah.
We don't want to close.
Yeah, that's a good point, Biz. I'm glad you said that. I should have said that right from the outset. There are changes in the law that allow you to, amortize COVID-related deficits over multiple years, and we're really trying to avoid that, just so we're not starting out next year and the year after, in a hole that could be even tougher to get out of if state aid continues to decline. So I agree with Biz 100%.
Okay. Last one, I promise. If we're predicting, we're going to get whatever it is, $20 million in tax receipts, but we say, you know what, we're going to scrape that down to 18. Are we able to spend, if we get 19 in, are we able to spend that as it comes through, or are we able to, do we have to hold that off because we didn't budget for, we only budgeted to receive the 18 and we can't touch anything more until we vote for free cash?
Our tax revenue is based on the recap, strictly on the recap. It's not based on our estimates. We have our 2.5% that we're allowed by law based on the prior year's taxes, and then we have the new growth. So that's a pretty solid number. We're usually within a few thousand on that when we go to do our recap. So those are pretty solid numbers. It's just when you go to close out your year, there's a calculation involved. It's, revenues over expenses and whatever you turn back. So right now we're looking that we could have a potential $1.3 million deficit in revenue. So in order to close that gap in the revenue, we have to find some creative ways to do that, which for us would be the turnbacks, any unbudgeted revenues. The town can't budget certain revenues because they're unknowns. So we're hoping that we've taken the most prudent approach to cover this. Last year on the expenditure side, just to let you know, we had a turnback of $1.1 million collectively in expenses, which is great. But if we get 1.1 million back right now, and we're projecting a revenue deficit of 1.3, we're automatically in a deficit of 200,000. So that's kind of what we're doing. And the more articles we close, the more turnbacks we get from departments, the better off we'll be from the free cash position closing fiscal 20. And the free cash won't be certified, I would say, until November, because we're behind on all the things that we need to do, and the state, like us, is behind as well. Did that make sense?
Okay. It does, thank you.
Okay.
So again, just to recap, and obviously we'll try to answer any questions you have. The selectmen have already voted to reopen the warrant and to place those 4 additional items on there. You've already voted one of the 4. There's still the 2 fire leases and the IT fire lease purchase and the IT lease purchase. And then there's all the different operating budgets, which changed because of all those reductions that we had to do. And again, the Board of Selectmen all unanimously voted last night to support it. So that's, I know this is a super condensed time frame from the amount of time and probably the amount of discussion you guys would normally want to dedicate to big changes. But this is the schedule we're dealt with.
So, John, what we would be looking for from the committee would be to authorize a 3-year lease for IT to enter into a voice over IP telephone lease agreement, 3-year lease. The mini fire pumper lease, which would be a 3-year lease. The fire department admin SUV, which would be a 3-year lease. And the community preservation committee housing rental article. Was there 5, Doug? And the last one was the budget, or is
Just
there something I
the
missed?
budget was the last one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what we'd be
You
looking
have
for
that
tonight.
typed up, Biz? You have that?
I don't have them typed up for the motions. I will
So-
get them typed up and I will get them over to you.
You need
So
them.
Liz,
Emotion.
excuse me.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yes, Julie.
Okay, we had a 3-year lease for the phone service, a
Mhm.
3-year lease for the fire department. What was the other one?
The first one for the fire department is called the mini fire pumper.
Right, okay.
And the second one is an admin vehicle or administration vehicle for the fire department. It's an SUV, and I believe it's a Chevy Tahoe.
Okay.
Again, 3-year lease. And then the community preservation allotment of the housing revenues.
Yeah, we voted on that already.
We already voted for that.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
I think that's what I have. And
Yeah.
just basically tonight, if you can approve our revised capital plan, as well as the revised budget. Then we can
Mhm.
move forward.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys can decide how you want to do it, but I mean, since we have all of that in writing, you all have it. I've been showing it on the screen. I mean,
Mhm.
personally, if I was you, I would want to, assuming you guys agree, vote it as presented rather than having to start flipping screens back and forth and have to read through every
Yeah.
number. I think you always have the ability to vote something as presented.
Okay, is this something you need a vote on tonight?
Yes, yes. We need it tonight because once I have the formal votes, we got the vote from Selectmen last night. We need your vote. I have to go in and undo the town warrants that we already voted, redo the town warrants, and that's going to take me probably a good week to undo them all. So once I undo them all, then we will send the drafts out for legal, and we will make sure that you guys get a new copy of the drafts before they go to print.
All right, do we need article numbers on this vote?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to, we need to reopen the article first and then vote it and close it at that point? Normally, it's taken 2 votes to do these things.
So,
To
I mean,
reopen an article? I've never heard of that. If you were
But-
on town meeting, yeah. Okay, I'm
To
sorry, Doug.
reconsider or something, we've always reopened it and then closed it with the
But it
vote.
hasn't been voted yet.
Well, all the articles and the entire budget was all voted for the warrant.
For
We
the
closed
warrant.
Right,
Okay.
so the articles are part of that.
I was thinking the town meeting vote has taken place.
I mean, John, let me say this. So the interesting thing with Rockland is, which is different from other towns like Sandwich, the charter has, once the selectmen close the warrant, the warrant is closed. And then the selectmen can reopen the warrant and add new articles, which is what they did last night. But in the charter, it specifically says that they need the consent of the finance committee for those kinds of financial articles. So those 4 that we talked about, the 2 fire vehicles, the IT lease, and the CPA, those are new articles in a reopened warrant that the selectmen just need your consent to add those to the warrant. As far as the budget goes, it's more, I think, of a custom with how you've run the finance committee in the past, how you choose to do it. But I think in the end, all we need is just your, affirmative
All
vote
right, so-
that you support the revised numbers.
Okay, so I think what I was misunderstanding is that we were keeping the fire engine article and we were changing that article. What you're saying is we're presenting a completely different article to lease it.
Right.
And we're not gonna do the purchase article.
Right.
Okay. Okay. All right. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to approve the mini fire engine on a 3-year lease for $85,620.
I'll make that.
Okay, we got a motion from Bobby
Second.
and a second from Sheila. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Where's the paper, Jeff?
Oh, wait a minute.
All right. We have it unanimous. All right, good.
And I'll make the motion. Administration vehicle, the SUV.
We've got the administration vehicle for $22,372 for a 3-year lease. We have a motion by Bobby. We have a second by,
I'll second it.
we have a second by Lori.
Lori.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
And I make a motion for the IT to be switched to a lease too.
Okay, so for the IT department, we want to switch it to a lease, and the lease is, how much is it? 24,000?
You don't need the value of the lease. All you need to do is approve allowing the town to enter into a 3-year lease, of which the costs are covered in the budget. We'll get the legal terminology.
And all of these we should just refer to as lease purchase, because these
Right.
are all lease purchase.
Right.
And
All right, so allow the IT department to enter into a 3-year lease purchase
the
agreement.
town.
Town
town.
to enter into it's
Yeah.
a 3-year lease purchase agreement.
Correct.
So,
with a telephone.
And Julie, for reference sake, the fire pumper article in the annual warrant is article number 8. And the SUV is article number 9, and that's in the annual.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
I make that motion for the IT. Loans.
Okay, we have a motion by Bobby. We have a second
Second
by
it.
by Bill.
Yep.
Bill Principe, okay.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 That's a vote.
Before we go away or anything, I would really like to have a roll call so I can make sure that I've got everybody on here because I didn't know that Laurie was here.
Okay.
Do we have one more vote to approve the budget as amended?
We do. We have,
Okay.
I'll make that motion to approve the budget as amended.
Thank
Okay.
you.
are we talking about the budget or the review revenue plan?
You don't have to vote the revenue plan. That was for informational purposes only.
So
What you
this
need
is the
to-
whole budget?
Yes,
Budget. Amended.
as amended.
Right.
Approve the budget as amended.
Was there any further discussion on the budget as amended? Because we really had presentation on that. We didn't have any discussion. Was there any further discussion on that? And the budget as amended, if I'm correct,
Doug, do you have that there at 65,000 and change?
looking at the last page of the,
You want 65358,903.
okay, 65358,903. So
Yes, sir.
Bobby's making a motion to approve. Go ahead.
Well, what was it? 651?
It's on the screen, 65358 on the top right.
903.
903.
Hold, please.
I make a motion to amend the budget as written, $65,358,903.
Okay, we have a motion by Bobby.
Yes,
Second.
I'll second that.
I heard Lori first.
That's
Although
it.
I can't see Lori.
Take it, Joe. Okay.
All right, so we got a second by Lori. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys. You know, this is not something that we ever wanted to be in this position, but I appreciate everybody's flexibility and understanding and, you know, willingness to make process things quickly.
Your job
Thank
isn't
you guys
enough
too.
without throwing this at you.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a job, Doug and Liz.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
It's
Let's
not.
hope things this bad next year.
yeah.
Oh, no, I don't want to do this again.
No, but it's been a real team
Next month.
effort. You know, all the department heads, every single one helped put this plan together. So it's a team.
The next thing on the budget agenda was, Biz, you had presented to me that we wanted to talk about
Yes.
rescinding or reconsidering our
Yes.
approval for the fire department for that machine.
Yes, you voted transfer of $20,000 in March, just after, you know, all this fun happened. And we can take that funding and we can put it towards the expenses are going towards our special COVID account, which is for FEMA reimbursement. So I'd rather have us reverse that transfer. So it'll free up money to help us close out the fiscal year.
That
You know,
money will go
Would
back.
that go back into our reserve account?
Yes, it'll go back into the reserve account. And then, as you know, when we get into the closing of the fiscal year, we have between May 15th and July 15th to do year-end transfers. So if we need that money to cover some other issues, that's something we'll need to do. But we, like I said earlier, we want to close as best we can in the positive. If it's $10, we did our job. You know, we're trying. And, you know, if it's negative $10, we still did our
Yeah,
job.
right.
I'm
Is
just
that COVID
clarifying.
account?
I'm
Is
sorry?
that COVID account guaranteed? Is that COVID
It's-
account guaranteed for us at this point?
It's a 75% reimbursement. It's a FEMA grant that we will need to apply
Okay.
for. And that is standard. So there's certain things in the CARES Act, certain things in the FEMA. So this is strictly FEMA, where it's a 75% reimbursement. And then the CARES Act money, at this point, we believe is going to allow us to cover the other 25%. So
Okay.
some of these weird things we're paying for will be whole on the FEMA reimbursements.
Great.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to,
I'll make a motion.
first,
Excuse me.
okay?
For the fire department.
All right, so I have a
To have it
motion
go
by
back to the
reserve.
reserve account and find
I have a motion by Bobby.
Mhm.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second it.
Okay.
Second by Craig.
Craig?
Mhm.
This is like Hollywood Squares. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
there are a bunch of hands there. We'll go with that. Any opposed?
Okay.
Oh, hi, Laura.
John, I'll send you back the paperwork in the morning so that you can just sign off on it and return it to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you email it over to me, then
Yeah.
I'll get it right back to you. No problem. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
All right. Last thing I wanted to cover was, well, actually, this came up during the meeting. We had put a June 17th tentative date, but it looks like, according to your information, Doug, you need us to meet on June 3rd.
So that was really only if needed, and as of right now, I don't think we'll need it. So that was really just, in case we weren't able to pull everything off. So I
Yeah,
don't actually think you need to.
Well, I'm going to put it on the calendar so everybody plans for that date,
Mhm.
and then we'll adjust it as we go. And, I'll just follow my normal process. And if we can cancel it and reschedule it, that's fine.
Mhm.
But we are, by the charter, we have to meet once in June. So if we don't need the June 3rd date, and we can meet on the 22nd of June
Mhm.
at the town meeting, then that'll work fine.
Okay.
Makes
Right?
sense.
Anybody have any problems with June 3rd?
No.
All right. Seeing no,
Would that be remote, do you think, or do you think we'll be able to get in town hall by then?
I think you'll be remote.
Yeah.
Remote.
Yeah, I think we'll be planning on remote.
I don't know. I don't like the way I move on this computer thing.
What?
Come on, Bob, you look good. Well, from here you do. I don't know about the screen. All right. So Larry, you took some time to join us today. We appreciate it. Was there anything that you wanted to share from the Board of Selectmen?
No, I think one of the things that came out of last night's meeting with the board was the immense pleasure, regard we have for our financial team and the work they're doing on the budget. To come up with a balanced budget on sort of such short notice, to have a town meeting on June 20 something or whatever. And the hours that the people are putting in to save us financially as best they can is incredible. And I just really want you to know that the Board of Selectmen really appreciates Doug Lapp, Jen Constable, and Biz. I'm not going to even try to get her name right now because I'll forget it. Elizabeth Zelensky. They're doing a great job, and without them, we'd be screwed. And I hate to use it. It would be. And they're doing a great job, and make sure we thank them at town meeting for the town people to know that this is the best thing we've ever done for them. Is to give them a financial team that doesn't know anybody in Rockland, who understands the problems and can deal with them directly, unemotionally, if that's a way of putting it, and getting it done. Jen comes up with these unbelievable things to solve problems, and Biz is just a whirlwind with numbers. She would even make my head spin. So I just really wanted to thank the FinCom for all the work you've done, and especially our team for all the work that they've done to get your work done. So, you know what I mean? Without them, we'd be in bad shape. I can't imagine what life would be like if we didn't have the team we were in there that we have now. So, to say thank you for allowing me to join.
All right, Larry, thanks very much. I appreciate the, it's good to see the town pulling together for this.
Yeah, great job.
All right. Doug or Biz, is there any other business we had to take on?
I don't believe so, no. And again, just thank you guys for acting so quickly. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't, I'm just noticing, and, it's my fault for not addressing it. The mini fire engine, 3-year lease at 85,000. I know that this was already on the capital plan, but has that number been changed and kind of revoted with the capital plan?
I talked to Rich about it, and what we concluded was the item was already on the plan, so they'll update at some point in the future and just spread it out over 3 years instead of the 1-year purchase. But it's on the plan already,
Right.
so they're good to go as far as town meeting.
Okay, that's perfect. I just want to make sure that's addressed. All right. With that, I'm good on my side. Julie, I know you had several weeks of meeting notes to review. But I'd like to, if we could, do you have all those electronic?
Yeah, I sent you copies of all of them.
You did. Okay. Did you send it to the Rockland email address?
No, to your personal. You emailed me back that you got them.
There you go.
Somewhere in your computer.
Julie, did you?
I have the package here.
So what do you say, John?
Well, la-di-da. I got 4 of them right here. How about that?
Okay.
All right. So I've got them here. I'm going to bring them up on my screen, and then we can vote on them. How's that sound? So that way, Julie, that'll be off your plate. For Biz and Doug, if you guys want to jump, you certainly can.
That's great. Thank you very much. It's dinner time. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Bye.
Thank you. Stay safe.
You
All
too.
All right. And I'm just going to go through this relatively quickly here. So here are the FinCom notes from February 12th. If everybody can see my screen. So on this one, Ken, which I haven't heard from Ken. I know he was in a hospital, then he came home. I don't know if anybody has an update on Ken.
Kentucky?
I'll try and reach out to him again. I had a text message from him, but I know he was.
You might be able to check with Larry. Might know something.
Yeah, I mean, I got a message actually on his phone from his wife saying that he was home, but he wasn't able to really do much right now. So I'll check and hopefully have an update by the next time we meet. But Ken, Bob, Sheila, and Dan could not participate. But this was the assessor. Everybody can kind of take a brief look at it. If there's any spelling errors, even if you weren't there, you can tell me if there was a spelling error.
There probably is.
Julia always appreciates that.
Yeah.
I think we used a comma here instead of a dot, just for that.
Oh my God.
All right. This is the diesel. Okay.
I don't think it's Butch Harrison. I think it's for the chairman of the Capital Planning Committee.
No, it's Rich.
Oh, Rich.
Rich.
Butch. Is Rich still here?
Well, maybe his friends call him Butch. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
There you go.
Is it? I think it's just Harris.
It's Harris.
It's
Harris.
not Harris. Yeah.
It's just Harris. Yeah.
There you go.
And then change it up into the attendees list too, Julie. After Debbie.
The second paragraph.
Second paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. We can call him Butch from now on, though.
Oh, he'll like that.
Where the heck did I get that?
Butchie. All right, there it is.
Good job. Okay.
Craig reported. There you go. There's Craig's report. Okay. All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Well, if you have to first.
Our motion.
If you're going to be first.
Our first.
All right.
I
So,
was jumping the gun.
okay, Craig made a motion and Jeff made a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Right?
Thanks for getting my back, Jeff.
I know.
It's been a long day.
Okay,
Let me 1 second.
Geez, I thought that was my computer for a second.
So I'm gonna save these as I go, Julie, and then I'll. Okay. All right, now we got the February 26 notes. Editing, boom, the screen.
it's mostly the highway department.
Lori, Ken, Sheila were absent, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is when we had money.
Yeah, this is. Okay. Got Gino's thing in here,
Yeah,
the 2 police cruisers. which are
Yeah.
out.
and the fire trucks.
Fire truck. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for February 26th.
I'll make a motion.
Yep, motion by Bill Princeby,
I'll second.
second by Joe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next one is, that's for
This one's done. March 4th.
March 4th, right? Council on Aging, Youth Commission.
You guys see that or no?
Nope.
No.
Hang on. Technical difficulties.
There you
No.
go.
There you go. So Joe and Ken were absent.
Yeah.
So Ixnay on the vote A on that one. Peggy came in. Senior Senator Jean Blaney. Junior School. Okay. Derek Yule. Okay. This is a whole bunch of
All the articles.
articles.
Right.
Well, these are all budgets for the
The budgets, yeah.
different things.
My name was wrong at the top of that, right there.
Mulvaney? Hey, Mulvaney.
I'm gonna hang out with my pal Butch.
And actually, my name's wrong through the whole document. It has an S at the end of Childs. But,
Well, you're only one.
well, it's 3. It's 2. There's one at the top and another one in.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended from Bobby.
I'll make a motion.
I have a second by Bill.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. One more, and we'll be all up to speed. I don't know why my computer doesn't bounce back to where it was. Took me a year to find this file. It is. See. All right, close that. Okay. And last one is FinCom meeting from March 11th.
March 11th?
It's 11th. That's what you sent me. You sent it to me. All right, Ken was absent. Craig Maroney is correct.
Not up.
Is it not in your stack? Julie?
No, I,
Hang on. Hang on. Listen to Bobby over there, the computer expert.
Yeah, it's because I'm just.
Where the hell's the
sitting here.
document? You guys are ridiculous. All right, Ken was absent. Rich Harris, now he's got his name spelled right. Not Butchie anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Della is the Board of Health. Delshane?
Yeah.
Sean, right?
Yeah, that's how you spell it.
Spell it Delly.
Delshane.
Delshane.
Yeah, and my name still doesn't have an S at the end.
Really?
Really, but that's okay.
Should be plural.
Yeah, I know. It's 'cause I-
Boom.
There you go.
Boom. Look at that.
Yeah.
Please here. All right. You got equipment here.
Mhm.
Doug Gollum. I have no idea if that's right.
Lemmy.
Galemi. Okay. All right. That's that. All right. So I'll entertain a motion.
I see another error there, John, right up at the bottom.
Is that?
I thought I saw another error there on the bottom. Joe G and, oh,
Could be A
Yeah.
and B.
B. Yep.
There you go.
Second. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from March 11th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes, March 11th.
Motion from Bobby.
I'll second,
And a second from Bill Stewart.
just to show him here. Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll say,
Okay, we have one more, April 1st.
I don't have that one, Julie.
You don't have that one?
Did you send it to me?
I did.
When did you send it to me? Did you send it to my personal email address?
Well, I don't know.
Let's do this here. That.
That was the VOTEC budget,
This one here?
April 1st.
Bazanga. All right. Sorry, everyone. Everybody was all excited. All
You
right.
don't have
Can you guys still see my screen?
March 11th, yeah.
I got March 11th up.
Oh, March 11th is up. Okay. We're going to try that again then.
Yeah.
Did you find April 1st?
I did. Hang on for a second. Okay.
Oh.
Minimize video. Start sharing. April 1st coming up. You see it?
Damn.
Damn. All right. Ken and Bob were absent. Okay.
That Esther Laurie's name.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Into should be one word.
Thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Dr. Hickey was in. Social Voc Tech. That conversation about Social Voc Tech, I still feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, right. You figure
No,
regular,
you made some valid points, John.
Yeah.
the regular schools in the whole, you would figure VOTEC would be there.
Yeah.
Unless
The-
you're taking the money that we give them.
Now, the Voc Tech budget, Julie, on here you've got is 14,406,191. I don't think that's just the Voc Tech budget. Unless that's, do we have to vote the whole budget or do we just have to vote our portion of it?
Oh, that's probably, I'm looking at the, what they gave us here. That's the,
Our portion is only like 2.1 or something like
It's
that.
1.8, I think.
I don't have the budget right in front of me right here. You have the last budget that we voted. Should be on the, it should be actually in what they gave us.
Yes. School department.
Education. Social voc tech should be 1.833.
Right.
Julie,
1833, what was the rest of it?
I'm gonna type it up on this, all right? Because
All right.
this is what we voted.
Okay,
866.
okay.
That's it right there.
Yeah, what I got is the full budget.
Yeah, we would have only, I mean, according to what our needs are for the town meeting, we would have only voted what's on the warrant.
Yeah, I just found that 1833 on the budget they gave us. Okay.
Okay. All right. You know, articles. Okay. Zero. Like that. All right. Anything, any more discussion on that? Or I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 1st, 2020.
I'll make motion.
I have a motion from Bill Principe to approve as amended in a
A
second.
second.
Second by Joe Gambon. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's a vote.
Hi.
All right, I will entertain a motion.
Well, do you want to do a roll call, make sure she has everybody that's here?
You have everybody, Julie, or do you need a roll call?
I do need a roll call, please.
Bear with me.
Can't you scroll through? What do you have a list there to scroll through? Everybody's picture?
All right, so Julie, here's who's here. You are here. I'm here.
Yeah,
Jeff is here. Craig's here. Bill Stewart is here. Joe Gambon is here. Bob McDonald. Bill Principe. Lori Childs. Sheila, okay. Are you all good?
who was after Laurie?
Sheila.
Yeah, I have Sheila. Okay.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and we will pick up on June 3rd as a reminder, as a placeholder, and we'll cancel that meeting if we don't need it. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
By
Second.
Joe, second by Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's a vote. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
One last one for you, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
There you go.
I didn't get to use this one, though.
Nah. All right. See you later. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.